How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. I make music as AfroDJMac. I'm an Ableton certified trainer. I am a teacher at Berkeley Online. I'm teaching the Ableton Techniques sampling course right now. Really cool course that I'll get back to in a minute. And I make my own sound packs and tutorials and all that kind of stuff. Today, I want to talk to you about gear and this kind of stuff that we all kind of long for. If you're anything like me, there's always something new out on the market that I want, and I'm excited about. And I think once I get that, I'll finally be able to make my tracks, make my hit songs and stuff. And I want to basically dispel that myth a little bit because it has sort of gotten me a few times, and I've been proven wrong over and over again that it's not the gear that's going to make me who I am as a musician. It's more the skills, it's more the work, the crafting of my different abilities, not so much some magic box that I'm going to buy one day and have in my collection that's going to make everything all better. Before we go, I just want to say that this show is sponsored by the AfroDJMac Music Production Club. Throwing that out there. The Music Production Club is a monthly subscription to my site in which you get a new download every single month. So I create some kind of, usually an Ableton Live pack. It might be tutorials, but there's something I create every month. I put a lot of time and work into those and try to make something of value. And that goes out to my club members every month. And I'm getting ready to release my next one for the month of June. Currently, the pack of the month is called Subs. And Subs, as you might guess, is a collection of sub-bass synthesizers. So I made a whole bunch of synths from the sub-oscillators of a variety of different synthesizers and built them into Ableton Live instruments. There's 30 in total. And there's also a few audio effect racks that go with that. It's really handy. If I make a ton of different subs all the time, every time I'm doing a track, I just sort of got tired of doing it every time. So I made a collection that I can use anytime I need a real deep sub bass. I can just call up these sounds, throw them on a track, and pick one that fits just right. Also, though, when you join the club, you get a whole bunch of other stuff. You get my live performance with Ableton Live video course that I sell for $50. I give that to you for free. You get a live performance template that's also free. You get the Ableton Live Pack archive, which is 150 Ableton Live packs. I sell that for $10. I give that to you for free. You get the Moog Fat Bass Volume 1 Ableton Live Pack, which is a collection of different bass instruments I made from my Moog Sub Fatty. I give you 30% off all purchases at my store. And on top of that, there's a lot of cool special offers and free stuff from different companies that I admire around the web. And these offers come from websites and companies like Patches, Subaqueous, Isotonic Studios, Elephant, Expanding Sound, Mode Audio, Music Gurus, Beat Drop. And there's always more being added. And thank you very much to those companies for supporting my members. So it's quite a lot of stuff, and it's just $6 a month, and you can even join for 3 or 6 months and pay even less. It's a great way to support what I'm doing because that's enables me to kind of keep doing this and justify spending all the time I do making music and talking about it and making tutorials and different downloads for everybody. So the Afro DJ Mac Music Production Club. And now I'm going to start telling you how you already have everything you need, which is kind of funny, considering that I just told you should join my club. But anyway, you already have everything you need. And I'm releasing this episode in conjunction with an article I wrote for Berkeley Online for their Take Note blog. Take Note is basically a music-related blog where they do everything from like artist interviews to tutorials. They even have a Take Note podcast, which is really good. They just released an episode with Marlon Williams, which is really cool about his process and his success as a songwriter. Definitely check that out. It's a great resource, and I'm really proud to be able to be included by writing some articles for them on Take Note. And I want to read you the article. I'll also point you to it in the show notes. I'm going to read the article to you, then talk about it a little bit. because I think this is something we get caught up in a lot, thinking that there's something else we need. But in reality, I think we already have everything we need. So I'm going to cue up some music in just a minute. The music you're hearing is called Hold On Till You're Old. It's a little piece I wrote when I was producing my Peaceful Synths Ableton Live pack. I was I came up with the idea for Peaceful Synths actually watching a video for the DeepMind synth that Behringer came out with. And one of the, I forget exactly who, but someone that was demoing the synth said beautiful, but in a European accent, kind of like a whisper. And I thought he said peaceful. And I was like, wow, they never really market synths as being peaceful. It's usually aggressive, gritty, biting. So it got me thinking I should make some peaceful synth sounds. And that's going to be the music you hear. I think there's a guitar I layered in over there too. But I think it's a really cool collection. It's not the most, commercial friendly way to market a synth, I guess. But I think if you need some peaceful sounds, it's a really cool one. And I think what I'm going to do is offer you a little sale on that. If you use the code podcast, I'll give that to you for half price. The peaceful synths. I'll put that in the show notes. Code word podcast. So here's the article. It's called You Already Have Everything You Need to Make Music. We live in exciting times. As musicians who use technology to expand our creativity, every week brings a new stream of gadgets and software to activate our imaginations. Often I've thought, once I get that piece of gear in my collection, then I'll be able to make my big hit. Although occasionally new gear has accelerated my work, usually I'm left realizing its addition wasn't as magical as I'd hoped. Maybe you've also been left with crippling buyer's remorse when a new piece of gear has left you Grammy-less. Perhaps we can also see it as empowering. Our ability to create great art comes from within, not from the gear we don't own. The truth is, you have everything you need. An already obsolete iPhone has more music production tools than the Beatles had for Sgt. Pepper's. We are simultaneously blessed and cursed by the ubiquity of powerful tools. We have access to power we could only dream of 20 years ago, yet we fool ourselves to believe that we need the latest and greatest to create. While teaching Berklee Online's Ableton Live Techniques sampling course, students often ask me about my field recording rig, expecting an elaborate collection of mics and boom stands, plus a huge backpack of mysterious gear. They are often surprised when I tell them a small $150 digital recorder, or, more often so, my iPhone. Clearly, there are more sophisticated options, but I believe the best piece of gear to use is the gear you have with you. I'd much rather use an iPhone to record an interesting sound I happen upon than not record the sound at all. And in truth, sometimes more gear overcomplicates things. Besides, once I place my iPhone recordings in Ableton Live, I often find that the low fidelity adds character to the sound. Here's a case in point. While my wife and I were on our honeymoon, we were visiting the fjords of Norway. While taking pictures, it occurred to me that the sound of the waterfalls might be a cool substitute for white noise. Not surprisingly, a professional field recording setup was not in any of my luggage. But my phone was in my pocket. I recorded the waterfalls, and I eventually made them into a collection of waterfall instruments you can download and use in your own Ableton Live projects. Had I been uptight about my gear, I, and many other people, would not have these unique instruments to make music with. Are you not recording vocals because you don't have a Neumann microphone? Did you not release your latest track because you don't own the fanciest mastering plugin? Follow this way of thinking, and you will never make anything. The truth is, creativity is born out of limitations. We come up with interesting and personal solutions when we have problems to solve. When I was young, I owned a Tascam 4-track cassette recorder, a guitar, and a microphone. In an hour, I'd record a whole song because there were no decisions to make. If I wanted some ambience in my recordings, I figured a novel way to create reverb. I learned my gear and found ways to push it to the max. Today, I spent an hour searching my library of 9,000 kick drum samples. In the old days, when I was lucky enough to have access to a drum kit, I put up my one mic and I recorded it. I got a lot done because I worked with what I had. Would you rather starve to death waiting for a five-star meal or eat whatever you had around the house and survive? If human beings start choosing the former, then our days here are numbered. Don't starve your potential waiting for conditions to be perfect. Record with your smartphone. Accept the background noise as character. Use limitations as an opportunity to be creative. You already have everything you need to make great music. Don't let the myth of new gear have you believe otherwise. Okay, and that's the article. You know, I find myself talking about this a lot, but I definitely fall victim to it all the time. I'm just recently I downloaded a plugin that I had been like really lusting after that I wanted. I thought it was going to be really useful and handy. And I mean, it was kind of cool, but it wasn't really it didn't spark my imagination as much as the idea of owning the plugin did. And I kind of felt after I got it that I should have just used my inspiration of hoping about this piece of gear as the fuel for my next piece of music rather than downloading the plugin, exploring it, getting a little kick out of like a new piece of gear. But ultimately, I didn't make any music that day. I just kind of tooled around with some knobs on the screen, got a kick out of it. But ultimately, I was left with nothing new. So I had this buyer's remorse that I mentioned in the article. I would have been better off not downloading it, not buying it, and just working with what I had. Maybe trying to find something else within my nearly endless arsenal of tools already that I have just inside my Ableton Live browser. I might have made some music out of that, being creative and trying to come up with new solutions rather than kind of just dropping, I think it was $30, which wasn't a terrible hit, but still $30 could have been a night out to dinner or something. I don't know. I just think that that was a good example of like waste, just letting this gear lust get the best of me. And it's not just gear, though. I want to kind of straighten that out too. Sometimes we do this with other things. We think, gear is the obvious example. We need more tools. But sometimes we do it with things like education. Like, I need to know more. So you might get caught up in like the rabbit hole of watching YouTube tutorials, or you might think you need to download some video course or whatever it is, or just kind of give up because you feel like you don't know enough. Education can also kind of do that to us. Now, of course, I do a lot of teaching myself, so I believe in the power of education. But I would hate for someone to not move forward because they think they need anything I'm offering as far as education goes. Make music, work at it. You know enough to do something, I'm sure. So do that, and then you can get your education another time. But don't forget, like you probably know way more than you give yourself credit for. I think we also get this way too about like our space where we work. I know for me, like a big form of procrastination is like reorganizing my studio and trying to get everything right, moving my wires around and putting my computer here or my desk there and just thinking like, oh, once I do that, I'll be able to make my great music. But I think it's another form of this same problem where we're avoiding the task because we feel we're missing something. So, I want to give you a little bit of a solution to this sort of thing. And the solution comes in the form of a challenge. So, maybe the next time you have this urge, and this is something I'm going to try to work on myself too, where you get this feeling where, oh, I need this thing, or you find yourself kind of like looking and reading reviews and watching videos on some piece of gear you're lusting for, give yourself a little challenge. Maybe you can't have that piece of gear until you do something first. And I would suggest whatever that thing is that you do first be something that you tend to put off. Probably the easiest thing for me to think of is just making music. If you feel you need some new thing to make music, challenge yourself. Say to yourself, I'm not going to get anything new until I make a piece of music with the things I already have. And what I like about that approach is that'll probably open up a few doors and help you rediscover some things you have. So you may decide, before I buy this new thing, let me spend a little more time with something I already own. Explore some older gear that you have. Take the time and challenge yourself to make use of it. I have a lot of pieces of gear that I've, thought were going to be really important. And I've still never really made a piece of music with it. Maybe fooled around, had fun with it, but have never made that piece of gear into any of my tracks or anything like that. So try exploring new gear. Maybe and that can also work not just for hardware, but also within the box, trying out presets, samples. Challenge yourself to make some music with maybe something that you think is not very useful. I've been really surprised in the past how much mileage I've got out of this technique, where you try to take something that you think sounds bad or isn't useful and make it useful. That's kind of like problem solving 101, where we take something that's not really working for us and find a way to make it work. I mean, it might be like an old drum you have somewhere that sounds like garbage. Maybe you can process that drum. You can put some reverb, compress it, put distortion on it, stretch it out, time stretch it, whatever, reverse it. And now you might have an interesting sound. You never know. Um, I always think of my old Yamaha PSR, whatever. It's not even going to matter if I tell you the model number because it's one of these toy synths. It's not. I hesitate to call it a synth because you really have no power of synthesizing anything. It's just presets, and they all kind of sound like garbage. Nothing sounds realistic at all. But it's one of these $100 things. Um, but I've found, like, by deciding I'm gonna use this electric guitar preset, there's this one in particular, it was called Distorted Guitar, and it was, like, the lousiest sounding thing I ever heard. But I found a way to use it in a track way back when, kinda doing this sort of challenge to myself, and it really kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, wow, you can kinda make anything work if you're creative. You can make a lousy microphone sound interesting. You can make a drum, like we spoke about a second ago, sound kinda cool, especially now with all the power we have inside our DAWs to manipulate audio. Give yourself that challenge because you're gonna find yourself working at something instead of longing for something you don't have. So I would say another thing you could probably do, maybe it could even be something like housework or stuff or responsibilities that you have. Do those first. Maybe challenge yourself to earn a certain amount of money. Maybe selling stuff on eBay or whatever. That you have to do this task first before you can move forward and get the new piece of gear. Maybe it's even just if you find yourself longing for something to buy something new. Maybe challenge yourself to download something that's free and make use of that. Maybe that's another way to do it. But I really do like the kind of concept of like reward. I think it's also good for us because if you do succeed at this challenge and say you make that piece of music with the really crummy drum you have, maybe it's like a one of those like kid drum sets that every parent realizes was a bad mistake when they buy it for their 3-year-old. But maybe you make that sound kind of cool in a track. You're gonna accomplish the goal and then you can go out and get your new gear, fine. But you're gonna give yourself that empowerment. And I did mention that in the article. And I do want to sort of focus on that a little bit. You create that sense of empowerment that you are able to do something that was challenging or maybe unexpected. In the article, I said, we get that feeling of buyer's remorse when we have a piece of gear that didn't work out for us. And it's kind of a letdown, but maybe that is actually empowering because the real magic doesn't come from outside objects and tools. The real power is already inside you. So if you're able to tap into that with something unexpected, some old piece of gear or something that doesn't seem like it's really of any quality that's useful, and you're able to make it useful, you get that shot of confidence. And it's going to make you feel like you are more capable. And you never know, it might actually make you not need to buy that new piece of gear that you're longing after. But if nothing else, at least it's kind of, your own reward. You accomplished some goal, you finished a task, and now you can reward yourself with the gear. But the good news is that if you do that, you've got this, say it's a track or whatever you've made with it, some piece of music, and now you get the new piece of gear too. So it's not like you had to wait for the gear and then maybe never made music. Because I think there's always a learning curve on something when you get it. So it's very unlikely you get something for the first time and then you crank out a tune with it or something. Usually you spend the time learning it and trying to figure it out. Okay, so that's my thoughts on that. You already have everything you need. So I think it's time to get to work. I shouldn't probably keep you listening to the podcast for so long because that's probably another way of avoiding doing the actual work of making music. And I'm laughing at myself because I'm I'm encouraging you to to go against everything I'm asking you to do. Listen to my podcast, join my production club. But the truth is you've really got the power already. Maybe the podcast and the club can spice things up a little bit for you, but you are already full of the ability. You are already loaded with tools. If you've got any DAW or modern smartphone, you've got plenty to work with. Use some of that, put it to work. Thanks a lot for listening to the show. Again, I'm Brian Funk. I make music as AfroDJMac. Check out my website, AfroDJMac.com. I'll put these show notes up for you. So if you want to download or check out any of the sources that I talked about, you can check those out. Definitely look at Take Note from Berkeley. So I'll put the link to that as well. It's basically it's a little long, but it's online.berkeley.edu/take note. I'll put the show notes. I'll put the link in the show notes. But again, thanks so much for listening. This is the Music Production Podcast. Have a great day.